Good morning, good evening, good night, good day, good afternoon. This is Kurt Austin live. Crash Test Dummy, just saying hello to you this evening. This is episode 5. Episode 5 of the Crash Test Dummy. Why am I the Crash Test Dummy? Because I've been in safety, supply chain logistics for going on 20 years now, and the most fun that we have in the safety world is breaking things. We like to be the Crash Test Dummy because the Crash Test Dummies were the first safety experts. So what we try and do is not get hurt. That's what we try and do. Stay safe. There's certain things we like to do. We break things. We stay safe. We like to write up regulations and codes that make sure that everybody else doesn't do the same problems that we have. So what I've been doing the past 5 weeks, this is episode 5 right now, is talking about some of the things that OSHA, or the Occupational Safety Codes, Occupational Safety and Health Association in the U.S., or Occupational Safety and Health Association in Ontario is what we're looking at here. So what we like to talk about is what they say to stay safe. So what we did today is we're talking about get your mitts out. So what does ANSI, not my anti-Psi, what does ANSI, the American National Standard Institute, what do they have to say about keeping your mitts on? It means keeping your hands safe. Keep your gloves on. Because why? Because you need these. You need these to write with as much. You don't need them all the time, but if you have them, you sure like to use them. So the most important thing is, whether you're playing sports or whether you're at work, make sure your hands are protected. What do I do? What do I do for a living? I keep people safe at work. I mostly specialize in workplace safety incidents. So I spend most of my days above ground, below ground. I actually have been 7,000 feet below ground before. I surveyed the snow lab, the neutrino facility in Sudbury, Ontario, which is 7,000 feet below ground. It's a 5,000 square meter clean room. It's actually pretty cool. Size of a few football fields. Anyway, what I do is I just try and keep people safe at work. So what we're talking about is, what types of gloves would they be using underground? Well, mostly what they're doing is trying to keep things from getting into the atmosphere. So in a clean room, you want to make sure you have clean gloves. So what we have here, excuse my stepping out of frame at the moment, is something like this. Basic, clear vinyl, exam grade nitrile gloves. These have been really popular the past year and a half with the COVID situation, so I can't really express how many times I've been called or asked or questioned about, do I have any nitrile gloves? What's a nitrile glove? Well, nitrile glove is basically non-latex type of glove, because a lot of people have latex allergies, so that's what they went with. So that's one type of glove that they were using in COVID. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's just one type of glove. Well, how many glove types are there? Well, a lot if you're in sports. Even more if you want to start talking about safety in workplace. Well, there's 12 different types of gloves. 9 different ANSI codes. Remember I mentioned ANSI, the American National Standard Institute? Well, there's 9 different types before you start going into the EU standards as well. Most important things everyone talk about is your cut level, your cut resistance. So that's what you want to think about. If you're at work, you want to take care of your hands. You don't want them to get cut up. So that's what most people think about gloves. Same thing if you're playing sports. If you're playing football, number one sporting injury is football. Use your hands. What if you have someone stomp on your cleats, or actually just scraping? An awful lot of times you want to have protective gloves just for sports. So that's one of them. What's another thing I have to worry about? Well, cut resistance is one of them. But what happens if you don't have to worry about blades? Well, punctures. Same kind of thing. That same cleat, that same football player, well, they stomp on it. We have to worry about blunt proof. Well, what type of blunt proof? What type of crushing? What type of cut? What type of resistance? Well, you have to look at not damaging the 27 bones and 30 some odd muscles. I think 30 muscles in your hand. So you have to make sure that can withstand a certain amount of crushing or puncturing or pushing down, or making sure that your hand is protected. So we start to count some of those. So puncture resistance is going to be anywhere from A1 to A9. What does that mean, Kurt? Well, basically it's the amount of grams, the amount of weight, the amount of pressure to travel 20 millimeters, or 20 millimeters is about the thickness of this little pen right here. The little wee tip on the pen. Well, it's going to cut through that. It's very small, very tiny, but how much pressure does it take to go through there? Anywhere from 200 to 2,200 what are we looking at? Grams per pressure. A lot of times we're looking at newtons in this particular one here. It's boring. I'll stop talking about that. Let's talk more about sporting injuries. Let's get back to football. The number one hand injury in football is the hand, the football, the jam, trying to catch the ball. How many times do you see it get jammed? Or Tom Brady was it last weekend? No, who was it? Mahomes? Who was it last weekend? Was throwing the ball and just jammed his finger right up on the defender's arm. I think it was his bicep. Just completely jammed it. You have to pull it right back out again. So that's a sporting injury. You have to worry about it again. Those 27 bones and 30 muscles. So that's a really common injury in sports. Same as work, same kind of thing. If you're reaching into something, you get a lot of reach-in injuries. So a lot of times you'll injure this bone right here, the punctum, not the punctum thrust down here, this bone right here. It actually has to be protected an awful lot. So you have a lot of back of hand injuries. So you find a lot of sports or mechanics type of glove, they'll protect this little bone right here, just because that one gets chipped off a lot. When it gets chipped, it's really hard to really, I don't know how you fix that. I'm not a doctor, but I just know it gets injured an awful lot and it hurts. So a lot of the gloves that I recommend or see in safety are what's advised, protect the back of your hand, the metatarsals, because the back hand injuries are a leading cause of injury, especially, doesn't matter, sports, mechanics digging in, the scraping, the blunt trauma, that cleat on top of your foot, or say you're playing baseball. You're sliding into home, you're sliding for a second, you're sliding anyway, you're doing a head first slide, that hand's going way to left, right, depending on which way you're coming at the base, your hand goes in there, you don't want to jam that finger, you want proper gloves, something to slide. So, sliding, that's another part of safety. What would sliding do? Well, that's an abrasion. So just like a base runner going into the plate in baseball, or you're up to bat, how many times are you going to have to squeeze that bat and run it around before you feel those gloves aren't worthwhile? Well, in a working industry, you can't afford, we're not $1 million players, you can't afford to pay a worker that much. You give them a pair of gloves. You want to see how long those gloves are going to last. You look at abrasion resistance. So instead of a baseball player, a guy is pushing logs through a mill, trying to get pieces of wood so they can build that $1 million mansion for that $23 million middle reliever type of area. He needs his home built. You need that lumber. Someone has to actually produce, cut, timber, whatever. They have to make that lumber. They need gloves. Simple gloves protect their hands. Only a couple bucks a pair, but you want to know how many times they're going to be able to wear that. So how many logs can they shoot through that chute before they actually have to start worrying about how many times they have to replace it. So anywhere from 0 cycles to 20,000 cycles before that glove will fail. That's what people want to think about. So talking about OSHA again, what is the most important thing in the workplace? What does a worker have to worry about with their employer? Well, according to OSHA, really the employer's job is to protect the employees from workplace hazards that cause injury. Excuse my hands. I've really used to doing this in front of a very large room. So you're looking to make sure that the worker's taken care of. So you want to make sure their hands aren't injured. So if there's a potential for a hand injury, then you have to make sure that they're protected. So you provide gloves suitable for their workplace environment. As I mentioned before, 12 different types of gloves out there. That's before you get into the subsections, the 7 different categories of cut, then your resistance, then your punctures, all that type of idea. Before you start even getting into chemical splash, you want to start talking sizing. So, outside of chemical splash, very important, whether it's sports or whether it's working. I deal with working, so you want to start talking about glove size. Kurt, how do you measure for gloves? Really simple. You take the middle of the finger, that middle finger, and you say, Kurt, your podcast is kind of boring. Maybe turn it up a little bit. So you turn the volume up on your middle finger, and then you stretch it all the way to the back of your elbow, and that's your glove length. Whether you're talking about a standard 9-inch right here, or whether you're talking all the way 30 inches down most often at the elbow, is a type of glove. And then again, with 7 inches around the palm being the most common palm size, the mediums, the largest, is where you're looking at the 6 to 9 inches around. That's where your size is going to be. So you make sure you have the proper sizing palm. A lot of times you'll find in safety the biggest problem is going to be around the fingertips and the nails. Long fingernails, of course, will get bunched up and jammed, and you don't get proper procedures or proper grip or dexterity in your gloves. Football players, especially, in all this, because they're so keen on catching that ball, they don't want anything to get in the way of their fingers in that ball, but they want to be able to grab it and grip it, kind of like the ice block movers, which is where football gloves came from. Was the original ice block movers had to grab it, grip it, and move it, but they didn't want anything to get in the way of those tips. So you have to make sure that you have nice and clean at the top, and then no tips for your fingertips. So a very good glove to make sure that your hands are taken care of and very dexterous. So that's one of the things you have to think about as well. Gloves, abrasion, making sure that you have the right glove for the right job. ANC stages 1 through 9. That's pretty boring stuff, but extremely important. Really, why are we worried about hand protection? Well, 71% of all injuries could have been prevented at work because of the hand. You wore gloves. What does that equate to? About $27,000 a year to the worker. Is that interesting? Probably hurts them a lot. So how often do I hurt my hands at work? All the time. I have scars all over my hands. And I'm in sales. I don't actually do much of the heavy work anymore. I survey the places, but most of the time I'm wearing gloves. So I actually nick and cut all the time through the gloves, around gloves, or when I take my gloves off. And all I do is walk around, keep people safe at work. So what's the most fun I've had wearing gloves? Well, underground you have to wear gloves. When I was going underground, I had to wear two different types of gloves because you have to don and you have to doff before you go through the showers, the whole system. You have to have your clean gloves and your dirty gloves. That's the fun stuff. The most fun gloves I had was when I put on a nice leather cow leather riding glove wrapped right around, tethered to a bull. 2,000-pound bull in Phoenix, Arizona. So you want to talk sports, you want to talk how good of a glove you want to make sure that grips really well. Well, I didn't want to let go of that rope. You wanted the best possible glove you could use for that. So what type of glove would a bull rider use? Well, leather. Believe it or not, leather has extremely great abrasion resistance. It's been around for a long, long time, so use a leather. If you're really averse to a leather type of glove, then think about a synthetic leather. There's a tremendous amount of great synthetics out there to replicate the use of actual real leather because it's really frowned upon in today's society, but leather is still an inexpensive way. And then for the people that do eat meat out there, then of course it ensures that there's no waste of the byproducts, or at least it gets reused or used or not thrown to some sort of waste disposal area. So that's one great thing that does come out of a glove. Everything is used. So what are the most common? I'm sorry, I'm used to podcasts, not used to the podcast thing happening here, everybody. So what's the most important thing? Well, construction workers. Construction workers use the most gloves. Pretty well every time you see a construction worker, they have those really cheap gloves. You get $10 at the local hardware store, $10 for a pair, that type of idea. They're cheap, they're easy, but those little things are extremely useful just to keep cuts, nicks, and grip on absolutely anything, because your skin is meant to protect your body, what's inside of it, not what's outside of it, unless you're talking sun and moisture. It doesn't stop punctures and cuts. That's not what it's meant for. Gloves are meant for that. So, put your mitts on. Really important thing. All right, so what else do you think is really important about gloves? Well, Woody, I like to see you an awful lot because you're in absolutely every room. You just keep track of all of our stats. I love my stats being kept track of. Thank you very much for that. It's awesome. So what are the great things to worry about gloves? Keep your mitts on. Well, you have to worry about that in safety. Why do you keep your mitts on? Well, you stay safe at work. What other uses are there for gloves? Well, it's cold out. What do I like to use when it's cold out? A couple different types. These are some good ones. These are my high-vis ones. These are my icy ones. These are MCR Safety Abrasion 3. So that means they're going to be looking at 10,000 cycles is what they can get out of these things before they have to be replaced or worked through. They also have a gram weight inside of them for warmth, 1,500, I think, the gram weight on these. These are so you can be seen. A lot of times when you're looking at the oil fields out west or some of the higher areas, they want to make sure that the workers up on the oil fields have a high-vis glove on so the belayer down below can actually ensure that they're wearing the gloves. Because as I mentioned, 70% of these accidents are preventable by wearing these. Most common, ice moving gloves, whatever you want to call them, standard cotton with the dot. Couple bucks a pair. Incredibly warm, surprisingly, and great grip. These things actually work out extremely well for standard issue gloves for winter time. We still need a grip. Great for box movers. All the Amazon drivers out there, that type of idea. They're great if you want to put them through a warm glove. So you want to double your gloves up. Really good idea as well is grab some of these gloves so you can get the gloves with a grip, and you put these inside of an extra large glove or something else to keep the shell. So you use the shell for the wet weather, and you have your grip on the inside of this. So you don't want to have a cotton inside and outside because it'll slip right out. So this will at least grip the inside of the glove so you can keep the moisture out and use the glove. It's amazing how much of a difference it'll make if you have really wet hands, really wet gloves, just to put one of these on. afterwards. If your hands are really wet, I used to keep a pair of these in my pocket or something, in my inside pocket, my gloves. When you're wearing a high vis vest, you have pockets everywhere. So I'll try and keep a pair of those that are dry and handy. So if I'm scraping off the windshield, or if I've just come from a survey outside, or if I've come from a mine site, I'll have at least a pair of warm, dry gloves to put on my hands, and it helps you get through to that next shift, that next thing you have to do. So that's what we're talking about today, is get your mitts out. It's December. It's cold. I'm Canadian, so it's cold up here. I go up north in Canada an awful lot. It's a lot colder up there, so we always have to make sure we have our gloves on. Some of the larger contractors, they actually insist on the glove program to make sure that their workers keep their hands safe, because these extremities, these are little things that get frostbite first when you're working outside. You start getting frostbite, you can't work, you can't hold your tool. All of a sudden, you're an unsafe worker, and that's dangerous because you can't feel your tool. You could drop it. A lot of things like that. Sports injuries are the same thing. If you can't feel the tips of your fingers or your hands, you don't know when you've hurt them. All you know is that when you take gloves off, they start to burn. That's your instant sensation of potential hypothermia or frostbite stepping in. Know an awful lot about frostbite up here in the north, so you have to really make sure your extremities, your tips are really well taken care of. So that's what I like to talk about. Now, if you've been to the show once, twice, this is our 5th episode. I usually talk about this hour has 15 minutes. I did start out with this hour's 22 minutes because I like to keep this at the 20-minute level. Normally I run out of a couple of things to say. I just like to spew out a whole bunch of stats, throw out a whole bunch of things that everybody wants to clip, or maybe talk about a couple of stats. I always like to throw out a website. I'm going to start that now. So check out the OSHA site, which is the OSHA, OSHA.gov. That's the U.S. Safety site. Or in Canada, you have the CCOHS. That's the Canadian Occupational Health and Safety site. Those are two great links for you to look at for your own personal safety programs at work. I check out a couple of those things as well. I have my own site I'm checking out right now. It's called PictoSafe. I got a hashtag make it safe, PictoSafe. So that's what I like to talk about, everybody. I like to talk about staying safe at work. We're covering today, get your mitts out, keep your mitts on, keep your hands safe, stay safe at work. What I like to do, I like to create a safe world, a safer world. I like to make sure everyone stays safe at work so that everybody deserves to get home to their loved ones, their dog, their pet, their goldfish, their spouse, their partner, their children, whomever they want to go home to, or whether they just want to go for a walk at the end of their shift. Whatever they're doing, they deserve to leave their shift the same way they started work. That's what we'd like to talk about here at Crash Test Dummy. That was episode 5. Pull your mitts out. Pull your mitts out. Put your mitts on. Anyway, everybody, thank you very much. Take care and have yourself an awesome evening.